All right, welcome back. We are doing some more factoring. So let's go over a couple ideas. No matter what you're given when you factor, you want to take out the GCF. That is your first priority. Find that GCF. And once you take out the GCF, you have a lot of decisions to make from there. What I see on my paper for the first problem is that there is no GCF for all four pieces. And I notice there's 4 terms. So I'm going to factor completely by looking for the GCF. And since there's 4 terms, I am going to factor by grouping. Now, we've already done this, but I want to review it because we're going to use this to help us on the back. And so when we get to the back, we have several examples where we may or may not need to work hard. And so this would be a trinomial, and anytime I have a trinomial, I'm going to use reverse FOIL. So this is a pretty friendly one. I get into here, there's a 3 out front, and there's no GCF. So this means I have to work a little harder. So easier when the A is in front as 1, because factors of 32 will add up to 12. A little harder when A is not 1. Factors of 48 won't add up to 26 because we have to deal with 3 out front. And so in the previous lesson, we used trial and error, which is a great option. I think we really should be comfortable with trial and error, especially when we're dealing with smaller numbers like 3 or if this was a 10. When we're dealing with bigger numbers, trial and error can be overwhelming to keep trying so many times. And so today I'm going to teach you how to factor trinomials by grouping, or what my teacher used to call it was busting B. So let me back up, and we need to do a refresher on factoring by grouping. We spent a lot of time on it, but we're going to break it down again. So again, no GCF. I'm going to group it. I'm a fan of the parentheses and putting my own plus sign in there. Okay, some people will just put a slash in here, and that's fine. What comes out of the first set is an 8x squared. All right, so all I'm doing is focusing on the GCF, which is 8x squared, and I am then left with x and a negative 7. Bring my plus sign down, and what comes out of here is a 5. But I need to look ahead. I have a positive x and a negative 7. That's going to leave me a negative x and a positive 7. So I want to force the negative out to flip it to the signs I want. And then if you see these 2 terms here, 1, 2, what they have in common is the x minus 7. That is my GCF. And what's left over is 8x squared plus a negative 5 or minus 5. And that is fully factored. We're going to double check that there was no GCF. And I see that x squared, so that's going to be something we're going to have to look at because sometimes this will keep factoring. In this case, it doesn't. All right, so next problem. I've got some really big numbers. So I think I have a GCF. Actually, I know I do. They're all even, so they at least divide by 2. I can go higher than 2. So I'm going to focus on the smaller 2 numbers, and I can divide both of these by 6. So then what we're going to do is we're going to test, can I divide 252 and 210 by 6? So that's where I'd get out a calculator and test it, and 6 works. Now I like to use brackets here because that's my GCF. So I'm taking it out of all 4 pieces. So I'm going to have to take 252 divided by 6. I've got 42, keep the m to the third because I cannot take an m from here. Negative 210 divided by 6 is going to keep me a negative, but it's 35 m squared. And then 36 divided by 6 is going to be a 6m and then a negative 5. Okay, so I'm going to come in with another color here. And I took out my 6, and the reason I like the brackets is now I'm just focusing on these 4 terms as I did when I started. And the brackets help differentiate from what I'm doing with my parentheses here. All right, plus sign in the middle, and there we go. So I keep the 6 going, and then I take out the GCF here, and that GCF is going to be a 7m squared. All right, so what's left? And make sure you look at your power, all right, and take that out. So we're left with the 6m minus 5 plus, okay, now here's what's getting some people. If you can't take something out, you need to take out that 1 as a placeholder, and you're left with 6m minus 5. So that 1 is a placeholder. 6 hangs out. What do they have in common? Because it's 6 times all of this. Well, they both have the 6m minus 5, so that's going to come out as a GCF, not squared, and what's left is 7m squared plus 1. Double check that there's nothing left that we missed and it is factored completely. All right, so I have two more. So I'd like you to take a minute and pause. Remember, we've already learned this. This is a refresher. Take a minute, pause this recording, and see how you do. Don't forget to look for a GCF. All right, in this problem, there is a GCF, and again, these numbers look big, but I'm focusing on the 42 and the 70. And what those two have in common is just a 7. So everything divides by 7. You had to test it out, and I got a 21, and they don't all have the same variable, so 21xy, okay, plus 6x, plus, I'm going to have to use my calculator for that, 245 divided by 7, 35ny plus 10n. So I'm not rearranging unless when I go to factor it doesn't work. So I'm going to jump in, group the first two, plus sign, group the second two. All right, I keep my 7 going. And these have a 3x in common, which is 7y plus 2. And then these have a 5n, which leaves me 7y plus 2. So you can't force this to happen. If something's not matching up in parentheses, we need to go back and reevaluate. The 7 is what they all had, so it's 7 times everything. The 2 pieces here, 7y plus 2, pull that out, and it has to be times the 3x plus 5n. So remember, guys, 7y plus 2 times 3x, right there. 7y plus 2 times 5n, right there. Take it abstract and break it back down. All right, well, I definitely see that they all have an m in common. I'm going to look at the 63 and 45. And there's a couple common factors, but they don't work in the 120, the 168. So they all do divide by 3, okay? So we have to look for everything and an m. So that might take a little effort. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in my calculator. I get 56 mn plus, what am I dividing by? 321 is what I should get, which is 21m squared minus 40n, oops, I just said it, minus 40n, and what do I have? 45? Sorry, I got distracted. And that'd be 15m. But I'm just double checking myself, yes. Okay. Now that I've got my GCF out that's going to come and follow through, I'm going to come in and do my parentheses. And what I have is that 3m hanging out, don't lose it, 56 and 21. I think the biggest thing I can take out is a 7. So I'm going to try a 7m. And then what's left is 8n plus 3m, because I have that extra m there. Okay, plus, now here's the thing, these have a 5 I can take out, but see how it's a negative negative? I need positive, so I'm going to take out a negative 5. And that leaves me a positive 8n and a positive 3m. Okay, so I've got my 3m on the outside. What these two have in common is 8n plus 3m. And then what's left over is 7m minus 5. Okay, so we have factored completely. Now, I just took a chunk of time, about 9 minutes, to review factoring by grouping, and I thought it was important to do that because we're going to use it now, okay? That is just going to be a small part of what we're doing, but it should be the easy part of what we're doing. So let's go ahead and look at these examples. Now, if you take a minute, these are all trinomials. If you look at these, take a minute, look at them. Everyone on here is a trinomial, okay? So now that we know they're all trinomials, I'm not really factoring by grouping. And since A is 1 here, this is the easier factoring. Factors of C will add up to B. So this one, I'm just really jumping in. I truly am using trial and error, but I don't have to work so hard. 32, I was thinking 16 and 2. That gives me 18. So 8 and 4, oh, I'm done. It's 8 and 4. There's other options, right? but I don't need to use them all. So positive, positive, so let's jump into reverse FOIL. X times X, and a positive 8, and a positive 4. And there it is. So this is why it truly is a trial and error. First, outer, inner, last, but we have that quick trick. The factors of C will add up when A is 1. X squared, 32, the outside is 4x, the inside is 8x, and that's my 12x. So that's why this trick works when you have a 1 out front, because when I go to multiply the outside, it's 1 times 4, so I keep that 4. And it's 1 times 8, so I keep that 8. That's why these factors don't change and add up. Now, if I do this, I'm done. I've double checked it. There was no GCF. So over here in this problem, the first thing I want to do is find a GCF. 3 went into these, but it doesn't go into 23. Quick check, is it divisible by 3? Add up the digits. 4 plus 8 is 12, which divides by 3. So if the sum of the digits divides by 3, then the number does. But 2 plus 6 is 8, and that does not divide by 3, so 26 does not. Okay, so no GCF. Now I can jump in and do trial and error. And if I did trial and error, my only options are 3n and 1n, and I would just put those in there. And then I do have a lot of options for 48, right? 4 and 12, 24 and 2, 12 and, oh, I already said 12 and 4, 3 and 16, 1 and 48, and I feel like there's something else that I'm missing, and that's why you should write them down. And the reason you should write them down is because then you know if you've missed anything. Okay, but I'm not going to do trial and error. I'm going to do these steps, and I call them busting B. Now, it's because my teacher taught me them in high school as busting B. So we have our standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. The first step is to take a times c. So that a times that c. So our first step is to take 3 times 48. Okay, so I'm going to get a bigger number, 3 times 48, and I get 144. So that's step 1, take a times c. And the reason I'm taking a times c is because that 3 affects the factors of 48. That's exactly what we want. Over here, 1 times 32 is 32. So the factors will add up to 12. 48 times 3 is what I'm going to use. I get 144. Okay, step 2 is to find all the factors of AC, but I'm specifically interested in the ones that add up to B. Since I've accounted for that 3, I can do that. So 144, I was thinking of 12 times 12. Well, that adds up to 24. So next I was thinking about what goes into 12, a 4, a 6. Okay, so let's start. 144 divided by 4, 36. And they're all going to be positives because I need a positive to add up. All right, that didn't work. So 144 divided by 6, 24. That didn't work. Okay, well, we know 2 goes into 144, but that's going to be too big. So that's 72. We already got our 36. 24, we got our 12. We got 2. I need to keep thinking about things that are going to go in 24 and add up to 26. 18 should go into 144. And the reason I knew 18 went into 144 was because 36 did. So I'm using my factors to break down. And 18 and 8 adds up to 26. So that is step 2, to find the factors of A times C that add up to B. So I had to keep working my factors, and I used the 24 and I used the 36 to break down. Okay, now the next step is the big one. Okay, it's to rewrite, let me slide this over here. Rewrite the quadratic and bust B. That's why I call it busting B, but I guess the average person calls it factoring by grouping. So I'm going to come in here, instead of having a BX there, instead of having a 26, I'm going to break it up to make it an 18 and 8. And the order that you put it in actually doesn't matter. So remember, the first thing we did was look for a GCF. I didn't have that step on here, but that should be embedded in our brains. Take the GCF out first. So step 3 is to bust B. So I'm going to have a 3n squared. I'm going to have my positive 48. But instead of having 26, I'm going to break it down to a positive 18n and a positive 8n. And I'm going to say this again. It does not matter which order you put this in, it will work. Watch your signs though. So if you can see this, this is the 26n, we have busted the b up. Okay, guys, at this point, I don't have to teach you anymore. That's what was new. Account for the 3 times 48 to give you that number we want factors of, and because we counted for the 3, it will add up to 26. At this point, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, and we did those 4 terms so you can factor by grouping. So step 4, I have group in pairs. At this point down, you're just factoring by grouping. So I'm going to put step 4 in purple here. Group it, plus sign, you'd have to watch negative signs. And then step 5 is to factor each group. So these have a 3n in common. So this is step 5. Step 4 is in purple. And I'm left with an n plus 6 plus, okay, these I can take an 8 out of, and I'm left with n plus 6. So if we look at step 6, it says factor the whole. That's what we've been doing. I have these two terms. They both have n plus 6 in common. Take that out. What's left is 3n plus 8. And then I would just double check to make sure there was nothing else left. And now I've factored it. Now that does seem to take a long time, especially when I'm explaining it. But this is a surefire way that will always work, and you don't have to keep trying. 48 had a lot of factors, so you'd be trying it a lot. So let's try this again. And I do want to remind you, if you're doing trial and error, if you have a 3 and you would have had a 3 and a 1, you would never put any factors that have a 3 with that 3. So if you were doing trial and error and you knew you had a 3n and a 1n, any of these factors, the 12, the 36, the 24, like 24 and 6 we would just throw out. Well, if we were talking about 48, anything that has a common factor of 3, we would not use it. Okay? So that does help cut down trial and error. All right, so we're focusing on busting B. Again, if you don't like busting B, please use trial and error. I think everyone should be able to use trial and error. It is a time saver, but it can also be very frustrating. All right, so let's get going with this. I have 4 times negative 45. So I'm going to have a negative outcome. I'm going to use my calculator to double check. It should be, yep, 180. So 4 times negative 45 is negative 180. And now I need the factors of negative 180 that add up to negative 8. And I was thinking about 10 and 18 right off the bat. And if I have 10 and 18, I need one of them to be negative, and since I need a negative 8, the bigger of the two will be negative. So I don't have to work real hard. I got those numbers. Now I rewrite it and I break up the middle term. So I've got my 4p squared, I've got my negative 45, and instead of having a negative 8p, I'm going to have a positive 10p and a negative 18p. Now, for some people, they'll put the negative first, they don't have to deal with it. And that's fine. Guys, that's all that's new. Take a times c, find factors of that add up to b. Now you're just factoring by grouping. That's it. There was no GCF. I forgot to mention that I had pre-looked for that. So take that out. These both have a 2p, so 2p plus 5. Plus, okay, I want to change these signs, so I'm going to take out a negative 9. What's left is a 2p, and again, a plus 5. So what they have in common, 2p plus 5, take that out, 2p minus 9. And double check that you didn't miss anything, and that is it. All right, we've got a couple more, so this would be a good time to pause it and see if that works for you. I can leave these steps here. First thing I'm going to do is look for a GCF, and I don't have it. So the next thing is I'm going to account for the A times C, which would be, again, 180. All right, and I'm going to have to work a little harder, I think, for these factors. So 18 and 10 are not going to work. 45 and 4, and I was just thinking about that because of our last problem. So it might not come that easily. You might have to do some work, but if 18 goes into 180, so does 6, so does 9, so does 5. So we have lots of things to play with here. Now that I've got that, all I do is rewrite it. 9p squared positive 20 But instead of writing a 49, I'm going to write a positive 45p and a positive 4p. And then I'm going to come in and group it. So that's old news now. So the first one has a 9p in common, and what's left is p plus 5, plus these have a 4 in common, and what's left is p plus 5. So p plus 5 is my common factor, and then I have 9p plus 4. All right, so we've got 2 more to try. Again, I would recommend you pausing it and giving these a try. Sorry about my paper. Don't know what happened. The first thing I want to do, though, is look for a GCF. And in this problem, I have a GCF. I was first thinking about 3, but I went back and I saw, oh, a 6. And you know what? I want to take out that negative sign. So I'm going to take out a negative 6, and they all have an n. That leaves me, so go ahead, take a minute, pause it, change your signs. I want to see if you've got that. So a positive 9x squared, a negative 3xy, and then a negative 2y squared. So we have that extra variable. Now, I personally think this would be a great trial and error problem. You got your negative 6n, and then I would just break it down. There's not too many options here. But if you really like the busting bee, 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. We factors it add up to negative 6, or sorry, negative 3, so negative 6 and positive 3. Those are my factors. So leave that negative 6n out, and this is where I come back to my brackets. I've got my 9x squared, and don't forget you have a negative 2y squared. Instead of having a negative 3xy, we're going to have a negative 6 with the xy and a positive 3 with the xy. So extra variables, don't lose it. And then I'm going to group it with that plus sign. I'm going to keep my negative 6n going. This has a 3x. I'm left with 3x minus 2y. Okay, now I can take a y out, but if I couldn't take something out, I'd take out a 1, and I'm left with 3x minus 2y. So I've got my negative 6n, I've got my common factor for this of 3x minus 2y, and I've got my 3x plus y. So this would have been an easier trial and error problem because we were dealing with a 9, so we only had 2 options, 3 and 3, 9 and 1, and a negative 2 and a 1, or 2 and negative 1. And so this is a great problem to be able to do trial and error. No matter what, you want to take that number 6 out of there. All right, last one. I definitely have a GCF. I know I can take out a 2. I need to check if I can go higher, and I can. You should be able to take a 4 and an n out. So take a 4n, and I'm going to go ahead and bracket or parenthesis this, I guess, and be a 6m squared, a positive 11m n, and then a negative 30n squared. Okay, with that in mind, I need to take 6 times negative 30, and that would give me a negative 180. Seems like a common number, and we need to break that down. All right, so we were breaking this down and trying to find our factors of negative 180 that added up to 11. Now, this again is a negative 180, so I am going to use one negative, one positive. So I was thinking about 18 and 10, and that doesn't work. I know 9 goes into it 20. Oh, there it is. I was thinking, well, if 18 goes into 9, I could do a 6, I could do a 3. But that's what I want right there, the factors of negative 180 that add up to 11. So this does take some effort. You have to keep working with your numbers. Okay, so step 1, no matter what you have, is take out the GCF. The next step is to then bust B. Now, on this problem, I like busting B because 6 has a 3 and a 2, or 6 and 1, and negative 30, you know, there's a couple options here, 15 and 2, 5 and 6, 3 and 10, 1 and 30. You got a negative sign to deal with. So I could be here testing for a while. Trial and error is fine. You do not have to do this. But if you don't like trial and error, this is your other method. So leave your first term in there and leave your last term with the extra variable in there. what we want to do is break up that 11mn, and we're going to use a negative 9mn and a positive 20mn. Okay, so now that I have that, I am back to factoring by grouping. And so what they all have in common is a 4n. What these two have in common is a 3m, and what's left is m minus 3n. Okay, now let's look at this. These both have a 10 in common. Oh, I missed my 2. Okay, I knew I screwed up. These both have a 10 in common and an n. So how did I know I missed something? Well, I was looking at taking the 10 out and knew I had a 2m left and I only had an m. So that told me either something's wrong or I messed up. And I totally missed that 2 there. All right, then minus a 3n. That's better. So I have my common factor. I have the 2m minus 3n, which they have in common, and the leftover is 3m plus 10n. And there you go. So that is factoring by grouping or busting B. So I'm going to just leave this paused here for a quick second, and in case you need the steps to see, here are the steps for the process of factoring by grouping or busting B. This might also be another nice reference because the next thing we're going to get into are perfect squares. And so here are your perfect squares up through 15 squared and your cubic numbers up to 10 to the third.